I'm originally from Zimbabwe. I've been living in the United Kingdom since November 2001. I came to England when I was 16. So I had the distinct experience of having grown up in Zimbabwe just 4 years after independence. And that was an enriching experience. And of course, I'm sure most of us Africans in the world will perhaps know where Zimbabwe is at the moment, which is a topic for most of Africa, politics, economics, and all of these subjects. Living in England was became a blessing because I got to observe life from a Western lens and live amongst people who were separate from me, or at least I thought so whilst I was in Africa. And so to introduce myself or describe myself, I'd say I'm a human being. And the reason I say that is a result of my philosophical and spiritual journey. Of course, I'm African. Of course, I'm Black. Of course, I'm living in England. Of course, I now have British nationality. So I'm a European. So then the question is, what does this all mean? And in essence, it ties in perfectly with what we're discussing today, which is uniting history and tomorrow. How do we bridge our differences? And how I've done this is through my writing. I have written 5 books, which are on Amazon at the moment. So I'm an author, a poet, I'd say a philosopher, a thinker, a humanitarian, um, and generally a philanthropist as well. I care about humanity. I care about our destination. I care about where we're going as a collective, what it means to be a collective. Um, and also, I care about the transformation of our continent, Africa, from the history we've inherited, the reality we currently live, and some of the oppressing forces which still beguile and beset us to this day. So that's who I am.
Wow, thank you so much, sir. Okay, so now we're going to be speaking about uniting the history, the past, and history, and how to bridge our differences. And I think its topic is really important, especially from our speaker. So we're going to let our speaker begin speaking, and then yeah. So you're welcome, sir. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so how do you want me to specifically go? Because as you can imagine, it's a very broad subject. And people who know me, if you let me speak, I probably won't stop. So, yes, which way do you want me to go with this?
Okay, so let's do this. The first question I probably want to ask you, which I think is now, you often speak on dialectic dilemmas. Yeah. How can leaders balance honoring history with leading future-based, future-focused change? Would you want me to repeat that?
Yeah, so I think in this instance, you're referring to my book, The
Yeah,
Dichotic
exactly.
Dilemma, The
Yeah,
Fabric of Life. Yeah, so no,
yeah.
rephrase that so it's clear for me and the audience. Yeah.
Okay, so now you often speak about your books. Now, based on your book, how can leaders balance honoring history with leading future-focused change?
Yeah, terrific.
Now, should I?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
no, I get it. I get it. And well, I mean, this is it's not even the $1 million question or the $1 billion question or the $1 trillion question. This is the humanitarian question, you know? And this is exactly what the dichotic dilemma is, and ultimately what I was pointing to when I asserted, or at least I proclaimed that position. So, so first of all, as you say, balance. So the dichotic dilemma is about balance. And then the second thing is, as human beings, we're always going to be finding ourselves on two sides of a phenomenon, right? And this is why I call the book The Dichotic Dilemma, the Fabric of Life. Our duality, or at least the phenomenon of opposites, is a fundamental concept just in nature, in reality, you know. So, for example, war and fighting. If it, or at least if you think about the relationship between the West and Africa, right? That's a dilemma. It's a dichotic dilemma. So a dichotomy is when something is split in two. So on one hand, you've got the Western nations, and then on the other hand, you've got us as Africans and our destiny, right? So if you look at colonialism, if you look at slavery, if you look at neocolonialism, it's two conversations. The West, when they came to Africa, when they went around the world, um, their imperative, or at least their effort, was about creating wealth for themselves, for their purposes. Um, and by the way, this is just giving an example of the dichotic dilemma, so West versus Africa. But we all know that survival is something that unites all of humanity. I don't want to be one of those people who will be characterized as saying the West is bad, worse than everyone else. You know, all human beings, we all face the same challenges. We all do the same things in the same circumstances. But just for the purposes of practical examples, um, Africa is resource rich. This is why the relationship between Western nations and the African continent is the way it is. They must access our resources for the profit and the sustainability of their existence they want to make. It's a dichotic dilemma, right? So then the question is, not only for the present, we already know what's happened in the past, okay? We're already experiencing the reverberations of that past in the present, and that present is creating a future, right? So the question is, how do our leaders, how do Western leaders start to reflect on the dilemma that the world faces, that human beings face, which is survival, which is comfort, all of those things that they want to answer for themselves by coming and looting and plundering, if I'm going to use very simplistic terminology. And what that looks like for me is redefining our relationship to each other as human beings, right? So for Western leaders, Western nations, or even in the past, the conversation became that Africans, Black people are inferior, etc. So we've got a right over what they have. Okay. So we obviously need to stop that exactly where it is, right? Because first of all, it's not true. It was never true. And certainly for the continued sustainability of the human race, uh, and also importantly, for the many Africans who suffer because of Western policy and Western directives, it's a very urgent matter to address and stop straight away. We are all human beings, right? And this is the fundamental transformative leadership conversation that I believe we should be having. Once you start to communicate and see each other as human beings, equal, right? Then the conversation starts to change. Because what you see is fit for you as a human being with full rights, then you wouldn't see it as being fit for another human being because they also have the same equal rights that you have. It's going back to those fundamental conversations that were written in the United Nations Declaration of this, United Nations Declarations of that. And so I feel like, at least I said that we're living in the post World War, post World War II, and post Cold War world. We either win as a human race or we lose. Okay, because if we look at the world right now, the hot wars that are happening, Ukraine, Russia. Now we've just had Pakistan and India. We've got Israel, Palestine. Those are wars of humanity. Those are wars of history. Those are wars of perspective. And also we live in a nuclear age, right? And also we have all of the issues happening in Congo. And then we have the matter of Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso, which is if he would represent the neo-colonial liberation struggle hero, just as Thomas Sankara and Patrice Lumumba represented the colonial struggle heroes, if that makes sense. So he is the reincarnation of those people in this present day, because the issues they were fighting at that point persist to today. So we need to have ground up and top down conversations about what it means to be a human being, and ultimately what it means to be on this planet together under the same sun during the daylight and under the same moon during the nighttime, because these are uniting factors for human beings. So that's what the dichotic dilemma is, and that's what was my ultimate realization when I wrote that book, and why I called it The Fabric of Life, because this conversation is the fabric of what creates our reality. So I hope that made sense.
Thank you so much. I mean, that was a very detailed, explanation about it. So, and you've spoken, widely about the topic in a way. And then the question is, in your experience, what's the first step that creates trust when leading groups with different backgrounds?
Well, what creates trust, did you say?
Yes. What creates first step that creates trust when leading groups with different backgrounds?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's a really good question, and it's a brilliant question. So the first step that creates trust is, as I said in the first conversation, is making that first realization that that's just another human being across the way, right? So how do we divide ourselves as human beings? We
Mm,
divide ourselves according to the tribes that we come from, right? The countries that we live in, the religions that we observe, the denominations that we follow in those religions, right? Whether we believe in God or not, all of these demarcation points, right? So the first step is to say, okay, that is a human being, fundamentally, as I
mm,
said. And then the next step after that is fostering an environment of meaningful and effective communication, right? If there isn't meaningful and effective communication, then there's nothing, right? Our existence is communication. Our existence is exchange of words. Our existence is exchange of ideas. That's all it is. That's all it is. And the quality of life that we live is only a direct reflection of how effective our communication is, and the words that we're exchanging are, and the ideas that we are exchanging is. So first, second, and third step in the same breath, you know. But it all goes back to the first point. How do you see the other person, right? For me, it's irrespective what part of Africa you come from. You're my African brother. As soon as I see you, I just see a brother, right? I couldn't care what tribe or what this. First thing is you're my brother, and then you become miracle, and then you become everything else that comes after that. And then it's equivalent to anyone else in the world, right? If I see them, the first thing they are is a human being, and then they become whatever else they present themselves as after that. So that's the first step as I see it. But we usually put that step last, right? And then and not only do we put it last, once we've put it last, we devalue that person, right? And they become a cockroach, they become whatever, you know. And then we know what happens after that, killing and fighting and everything else. So yeah, that's my answer to that question.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much. I mean, I think this is a philosophical session, and then I'm really enjoying this. I mean, so,
Mm.
and I think this topic is very important, and I mean, what risks do leaders face, when they avoid addressing historical wounds in teams or communities, what risks are there to it? And should leaders, avoid addressing historical wounds and as a
Should
fear of having to, anyway,
should leaders address what? Sorry, just say that again.
it's like what risks do leaders face, when they avoid addressing historical wounds in their teams or communities or
Mhm.
country as a whole?
Listen, leadership in the first instance is putting yourself at issue. You know, it's 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 very easy to be in the background, right? So so what risks do leaders face? They face the risks of being the leader. They face the risk of being the one who puts yourself at the front. They face the risk to be the one who says ideas and have people challenge them, right? They face risks of being the person who's seen as the source of all the answers. And when things don't work, the person who's responsible for all the things that don't work, right? Leadership is a true responsibility, right? And then in the same way, um, those leaders should see it as that. You know, my belief is that great leaders should fundamentally be great philosophers in the first place, right? Because your philosophy of reality is what creates your leadership. Okay. How you see the world, how you articulate, and it's all going to come from there. Um, and in terms of addressing the issues of the past, listen, anytime you're addressing issues of the past, you're invariably opening wounds. Okay. So you're going to invoke anger. You're going to invoke natural human reactions. So really the answer to that, as I said, great leaders have to be great philosophers, is to then manage the result of opening those wounds by applying the dressing of great philosophy. You know, leading is also teaching and creating understanding and creating the basis and the platform for understanding, right? And yeah, so ultimately, the risk that leaders face is, well, I mean, outside of philosophy, it's being accountable for um, the reality of things, and that's why it takes remarkable people, those who are going to be truly effective, right? And if we're going to use Ibrahim Traore as an example, 18 or 19 assassination attempts at this point, right? And I would assert, right, that all he is doing is addressing issues of the past, which have created an economic imbalance in his country for his people. And what's the consequence of that for him? We all know what the consequence of that is for him. But he is also showing that he has a high degree of philosophical understanding. So all of the things he's saying make sense. The positions he's taking make sense, and that's why to some people he represents a threat. And and I think whenever you stand, you just have to accept that. As they say, it's
Wow.
better to live for something than die for nothing.
So
We're all gonna
nothing.
die at some point. So,
Wow.
that's all there is,
Wow.
you know?
Wow. Wow.
Mm.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I mean, so our next question is this. We often talk about inclusive leadership, but we know we have a whole lot of things that really sometimes really, it's not really what it is. So the question is, how can leaders make inclusion a part of our daily culture, not just a part of branding or marketing?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is exactly it. You have to mean it.
Hmm.
It's not a token, it's not a gesture. You have to know what it actually means. Like here in England, I was amazed because I watch a lot of football, right? I was amazed the first time I saw Black Lives Matter on Sky Sports during a football match. I think I took a picture and I saved it because it was like, wow, right? But then at some point, it becomes a gesture. So it goes back to everything we've been talking about, that people have to understand, like, what is the fundamental meaning of what we're talking about when we say inclusivity, right? What is the fundamental question we're talking about when we say diversity, right? Some people see it as tokenism, or like, what's that, affirmative action, or like undeserving people, right, being raised just because of the color of their skin, and
Hmm.
or you're trying to make us get along or be around people that we don't want to be around. You see, um, so but if and it goes back to what I've generally been saying. If number one, that is already your position and point of view, that those human beings over there are like this, those human beings over there are like that, and we are like this, then that platform, that idea of inclusive leadership is never going to work, because people are going to feel like they're being forced to do what they don't want to do, right? But if you already acknowledge that we are all human beings, then I come to you and say, listen, we need to be inclusive and work together on the basis of this, and that result we want to create. There's already a different listening for that message, right? But if I come to you, Miracle, and you're a certain tribe, and I say, listen, and you hate that tribe, and I say, listen, for the purposes of inclusivity, I want you, we are all going to work with this tribe that they also hate you. I mean, what do you expect? It's, it's like, like that biblical analogy of casting the seed on barren ground. You see, it has to be on fertile ground. So it's a case of what people believe, what people think, and what people know. And again, as I said, what is your philosophy of reality? You know? And the fundamental tenets are one sun, one moon. We all look at the same stars. And actually, then you start to see that the whole conversation for inclusivity is actually redundant, because we're actually all human beings. Okay? We are only different to ourselves. You see? For if someone was outside of the planet, they would all see us as the same thing. And they might say, those same beings over there, some of them are lighter, some of them are darker, some of them are taller, some of them speak different languages, but they're the same beings. You see? It's only to us that we start to occur as different because we create all of these ideas about it. And then we make it matter when the reality is it doesn't. You see?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. So, I mean, this is really nice, interesting structure. And so we have three questions more. So this is it. What has been, okay, let me put the question this way. How do you measure, or how do you personally measure success when working to bridge social divides? How do you personally measure success? I mean, because you made mention of the fact that maybe I don't like this tribe, but I've been being told to work with the certain tribe. So how do you then measure success when it comes to working to bridge social divides?
How do you measure success? Well, I mean, it depends how you want to look, how you want me to answer. Do you mean like actually collecting data? Because obviously there's data collection you can do. Like if you're a
Mm,
business, so you want to collect qualitative and quantitative data, doing people filling out surveys and doing follow-up work, managing the conversation ongoingly, all of those kind of things. Are people actually understanding the messaging? Is the marketing reaching who it's meant to reach? Are the speakers, the communicators on the subject being effective? And also you can see it in the relationships that are being created. I can use South Africa, for example. I think that South Africa is the biggest open social field experiment that's happening on planet Earth. Well, not the biggest. I just mean that in terms of what happened after the end of apartheid, right? You literally had a system which the day before believed that this group of people should be treated like this. It's incredible. You sign a document, and literally the second that document is signed, all of those legal prepositions are now illegal. Now those black people can go everywhere. Now there's two things. If you look at South Africa, I think it's been extraordinarily successful, right? Anyone who says that is not a realist, okay? If you're a realist, what Nelson Mandela created for South Africa with his leadership and his instructioning, his messaging, and his absolute integrity, in the end, created a gem for the world to study. Okay. And the reason I say that, for me, I use examples like the South African national rugby team. Um, Rugby was an exclusively white enterprise in South Africa. If anything represented apartheid, it was rugby, right? And now they've won two back-to-back World Cups, which even New Zealand never managed, probably the greatest rugby nation in history. And not only do they do that, they won it under their first black captain. Now that's just incredible, right? In one generation, apartheid ended in 1994. And then their cricket team, and then even just 2 weeks ago, their 100 meters team won gold in the 4x1 of the men's relay, and gold in the 4x4. So those are measures. You see, as you're saying, if you wanted to see if the conversation of inclusiveness is working, of course there's going to be areas where you could improve and could do better. But yeah, in real terms, those for me are very significant and clear measurements. So what that shows me is that the institutions and the infrastructures that are in place are creating real, tangible results for everyone, blacks, whites, and that's literally in less than what? In 31 years. We usually think that social change should take hundreds of years. They've done this in one generation. Okay, so it's incredible.
Thank you so much for that. So we'll come to the end of this session, and then So wait, this is our last question. Yeah, this is our last question to make this section short. And I want this section to be you know, quite very all up, you know. So I think we're about 4 minutes to 5 minutes, but I want this question to be quite one-on-one and something that you personally, personally. And the question is, if you could give one piece of advice, to emerging leaders about uniting history and tomorrow, what would it be?
I'd say be selfless, you know, because when you get the opportunity to lead millions of people and be responsible for their destiny, that is one of the greatest honors that any human being can be given. It will define your literal existence on this planet. And you're writing your history with every single thing that you do. So be selfless and realize that you are the space that's going to create the reality for literally millions of people and probably countless generations. And you'll be the reason people either come together or they kill each other. And that's it.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we've come to the end of this session. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's watching. I want to say thank you to should I call him our producer, Timmy? And I want to say thank you to our speaker. I'm really grateful for the fact that we have people like you that have created, content like this. And because I feel like in that generation, basically everyone is driven by content, and then it's great to have people like you that are creating things like this, to preserve dignity, human dignity, and human value. So I'm really grateful, really, really grateful. And so let me ask this question before we'll probably end with this. When people want to reach out to you, how can they reach out to you? And then I can at the same time, probably you want to say it, how can they also get your book as well too, if they have to read the book? And something to read to get more in-depth insight about the idea of the past.
Yeah, well, I think the book probably I would talk about the most is this one. It's a collection of poems. It's called Ottilie Rose. That's the book that I am promoting. As much as we've been speaking about the dichotic dilemma, the fabric of life, they're all on Amazon, both on Amazon. I have other books on Amazon as well. If you just type in RT Chiwuta, that is my pen name. I have one on love. I explored the love as a poetic expression. But at this point in time, Ottilie Rose, a collection of poems, an observation and appreciation of life. The thing about that book is that it synthesizes all of these subjects. In that poetry anthology, I discuss as much of the human condition as you can imagine, because that's literally where I was in my life. I wanted to understand the reason why we have to live and experience this life, for the better or for the worse. So I covered anything I could think of. I expressed it through poetry. So if you think anything that I said this afternoon resonates with you, that's what this book is. Ottilie Rose. So that's it.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm grateful for making this happen. I would say we thank you, and then we open that. Probably one day we're gonna have a physical section where we have you come, and I think it's very important that we have discussions like this with people like you, to help the minds of Africans really be very strong and then critical when it comes to critical thinking. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really good.
No, thank you,
Okay,
Miracle. And
everyone, thank you so much for joining. Okay. No, I'm listening. I'm listening. You wanted to say something?
Oh no, I just wanted to thank and acknowledge you as well. You know, when I
Thank you
first
so much.
heard about the idea of podcasts becoming a reality, I thought, who wants to listen to people talking all the time? But let me tell you something. Podcasts are phenomenal, right? Because we get to listen to each other. But more importantly, podcasts that are trying to communicate something that has value. And I think that's what your podcast is intending to do. And so many people need, and I mean need, positive messaging, right? We have, it's our responsibility to lift the collective consciousness of our planet. And most importantly for me, as a Black African with my inheritance, lift the collective consciousness of Black people. Because it is fair to say there has been a collective agenda for a significant period of time to lower that consciousness. And I'm not going to abide that. And thank you, Miracle, for affording me the space to be able to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Everyone, so thank you and thank you. Bye. Okay.